The Shattered Interface. Navigating the Thin Line Between Spiritual Awakening and Psychosis. A Guide to the Mechanics of Consciousness. By Adrian Reth. Introduction. A User's Guide to the Glitch. You are holding a map of a territory that many visit, but few return from with their memories and their lives intact. I wrote this book because the conversation about mental health and human consciousness is often divided into two warring camps. On one side, you have the medical model, which says that hearing voices, seeing patterns, or feeling a sense of mission is simply a sickness, a broken brain that needs to be fixed with chemistry. On the other side, you have the spiritual model, which says that these experiences are awakenings, sacred initiations that should be embraced without fear. My experience taught me that both are true, and both can be dangerous on their own. I am not a guru, a psychiatrist, or a shaman. I am a building inspector. My professional life is dedicated to looking at structures, identifying faults, and determining if a foundation is solid enough to hold weight. In this book, I apply that same analytical lens to the human mind. Part 1. The Mechanics of Reality explores the science of perception. We look at how the brain constructs the simulation we call sanity, and what happens biologically when we use tools to hack that system. Part 2. The Symptoms takes you inside the experience. I validate the magic, the synchronicities, the telepathy, and the entities, while explaining the neurological mechanisms, like the salience network, that create them. Part 3. The Navigation is the Practical Guide. It offers a diagnostic checklist for families, a survival strategy for those currently in crisis, and a path toward integration for those rebuilding their lives. To the spiritual seeker, if you pick this up hoping for a guide on how to open your third eye or contact the fifth dimension, consider this a safety manual. The experiences you seek are real, but they come with risks that are rarely discussed in metaphysical circles. This book is the warning label that should come with every psychedelic trip and breathwork session. To the person in crisis and their family, if you are reading this because you, or someone you love, is currently navigating a diagnosis of psychosis or schizophrenia, I want you to know that you are not just a list of symptoms. The things you are experiencing have an internal logic. You are not broken. You are an explorer who has lost their tether. This book is an attempt to throw you a rope. The journey we are about to take goes to the edge of reality. It is strange, it is terrifying, and at times, it is beautiful. But the goal is not to stay out there in the ether. The goal is to come back home. Part 1. The Mechanics of Reality. Chapter 1. The Consensus Hallucination. If you are reading this book, you probably believe that you are sitting in a room. You believe that the book in your hands is a solid object made of paper and ink. You believe that the silence around you is empty space. You are wrong. Neuroscience and quantum physics share a startling conclusion that most of us ignore in order to function. You have never seen the real world. What you are experiencing right now is a high-fidelity simulation, a multisensory hallucination generated by the 3 pounds of wet biological matter inside your skull. It is a user interface designed to hide the truth from you. For the vast majority of people, this interface works perfectly. It renders a world of solid objects, linear time, and clear boundaries. It keeps us safe. It lets us drive cars, pay taxes, and raise families. We call this state sanity. But for some of us, the mystics, the psychonauts, the shamans, and the diagnosed schizophrenics, the interface is glitchy. The screen flickers, and through the cracks, we see the code. This book is about what happens when the simulation fails. But to understand the glitch, we first have to understand the machine. The desktop metaphor. Cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman has spent decades using evolutionary game theory to prove a mathematical theorem. Evolution does not select for truth. It selects for fitness. Imagine an early human walking through the savannah. If his brain spent energy processing the quantum waveforms of the air, the molecular structure of the grass, or the multidimensional energy fields of the atmosphere, he would be paralyzed by the sheer volume of data. He would stand there in awe of the cosmos, and then he would be eaten by a tiger. The humans who survived were the ones whose brains learned to delete 99% of reality. They didn't see the code of the tiger. They saw a scary orange icon that meant, run. Hoffman compares this to the desktop on your computer. When you want to write an email, you click a blue icon. You don't toggle the millions of voltage gates inside the microchip. You don't write in binary code. The blue icon is a lie. It doesn't resemble the computer code at all. But it is a useful lie. It allows you to use the machine without understanding how it works. Consensus reality is simply the agreement that we will all use the same desktop. We agree that the icon of a chair is for sitting. We agree that the icon of a wall is solid. Sanity is not about seeing the truth. Sanity is about confusing the icon with the reality, the reducing valve. Long before modern computer science, the philosopher William James and the author Aldous Huxley proposed a similar theory. They argued that the brain is not a producer of consciousness, but a reducing valve. Imagine that consciousness, the mind at large, is a fire hose of infinite pressure. It contains every thought, every memory, every possible future, and the total awareness of the universe. If that hose were turned on full blast inside your head, your biological hard drive would fry instantly. So, the brain acts as a restrictor plate. It screws the valve down tight, allowing only a tiny, manageable trickle of consciousness to leak through. We call that trickle my life. But what happens when the valve gets stuck? For the schizophrenic or the spiritual seeker, the valve has been forced open. The pressure of the mind at large comes rushing in. Suddenly, everything is significant. Patterns emerge in the noise. Thoughts that aren't yours flood your headspace. The brain, desperate to make sense of this new flood of data, starts to spin wild narratives. To the outside observer, this looks like madness. To the person experiencing it, it feels like waking up. The neuroanatomy of the ego. We can actually point to where this valve lives in the brain. It is a specific network of interacting brain regions known as the default mode network, DMN. The DMN is the neurological seat of the ego. It comes online when you are daydreaming, thinking about yourself, worrying about the future, or replaying the past. It is the narrator in your head that says, I am Adrian. I am a building inspector. I am worried about money. When the DMN is active, the filter is tight. It keeps you focused on your individual survival and your social standing. However, studies on psychedelics, like psilocybin and LSD, and deep meditation states show a consistent pattern. They shut the DMN down. When the DMN goes offline, the ego dissolves. The boundary between you and the room vanishes. The filter drops. This is the crossroads where the mystic and the psychotic meet. The mystic enters this state through discipline, meditation, or ritual. They have prepared their mind to swim in the ocean of the subconscious. When the walls come down, they feel a sense of oneness and connection. The psychotic, or the person in a chaotic spiritual emergence, is often thrown into this state involuntarily, by trauma, by high-potency substances, like THC, or by genetics. They are thrown into the ocean without knowing how to swim, the spectrum of experience. We like to think of mental health as binary. You are either sane or crazy. But the reality is a spectrum. On the far left, you have rigid materialism. This is a person whose filter is so thick they deny anything they can't measure. They are safe, functional, but often disconnected from the deeper mysteries of life. On the far right, you have psychosis. This is a person whose filter has completely collapsed. They are flooded with so much data that they can no longer function in the 3D world. They see connections everywhere, apophenia. They hear voices. they lose the ability to distinguish between an internal thought and an external reality. In the middle lies the awakened state. This is the sweet spot where the filter is loose enough to allow for intuition, creativity, and spiritual connection, but tight enough to keep the person grounded. My story, and the story of many people diagnosed with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, is the story of sliding too far to the right. I started as a skeptic. I used tools like cannabis and breath work to try and nudge my perception toward the middle. I wanted to see the magic, but I didn't have a manual, and I didn't know my own genetic sensitivity. I didn't just loosen the filter, I ripped it off the hinges. The danger of the open door. When the door opens, it doesn't just let in God or love. It lets in everything. It lets in the trickster archetypes. It lets in your own suppressed fears, the shadow. It lets in the collective unconscious, with all its angels and its demons. If you are reading this because you are hearing voices, or because you feel like you are receiving secret messages from the universe, understand this: you are not necessarily broken. You are experiencing a functional shift in your brain's filtering mechanism. You are perceiving data that is usually blocked. The problem isn't that the data is fake. The problem is that it is incompatible with the survival game we are playing. Evolution designed you to see the tiger in the grass. It did not design you to see the aura of the tiger, or to telepathically communicate with the tiger's ancestors. If you are busy doing that, you get eaten. In the chapters that follow, we are going to explore what happens when we hack the system. We will look at the specific chemical keys that unlock the door, the entities that wait on the other side, and the terrifying logic of the mind when it tries to navigate a world without a map. We are going to explore the mechanics of the glitch. Chapter 2. The Spectrum of Experience. In Western medicine, mental health is often treated like a light switch. You are either sane, the light is on, or you are crazy, the light is off. If you start hearing voices or seeing patterns, the medical model says the switch has flipped, and you need medication to flip it back. But those who have walked this path know that consciousness isn't binary. It is a spectrum. To navigate the territory between awakening and madness, we need a better map. We need to visualize the human mind not as a switch, but as a radio dial. The position of the dial determines how much of the mind at large is filtering through your reducing valve. The consciousness scale. Imagine a horizontal line. On the far left, rigid materialism, the bunker. Filter status, 99% closed. Experience. The world is solid, dead, and mechanical. There is no God, no spirit, and no magic. Everything is matter. Pros, extremely safe, high functionality. You pay your bills on time. You stop at red lights. Cons, a sense of emptiness, disconnection from nature and intuition, the gray existence. On the far right, chaos/psychosis, the flood. Filter status, 0% closed, wide open. Experience. The world is fluid, alive, and overwhelming. Time dissolves. Thoughts manifest instantly. You perceive infinite connections, apophenia. You hear voices. Pros. Access to profound, albeit often confusing truths and intense creativity. Cons. Zero functionality. You cannot drive a car. You cannot tell the difference between a metaphor and a physical object. You are in danger. In the middle. The mystic, the swimmer. Filter status. Flexible, 40 to 60% open. Experience. The world is solid enough to navigate, but porous enough to see the beauty, divinity behind it. Intuition is high. Synchronicities happen, but you don't obsess over them. Functionality. You can visit the ecstatic states, but you can also return to the desktop to do your laundry. The goal of spiritual practice, meditation, prayer, ritual, is to gently nudge the dial from the left toward the middle. The danger arises when the dial is ripped all the way to the right. The swimmer and the drowning man. The mythologist Joseph Campbell once said, "The psychotic drowns in the same waters in which the mystic swims with delight." This is the crucial distinction. The mystic and the psychotic are essentially in the same location of consciousness. They are both accessing the subconscious, the transpersonal, and the nonlinear aspects of reality. The mystic has training. They have a boat. They know how to tread water. They enter the water voluntarily and return to shore. The psychotic has fallen off the boat. They are thrashing. They are overwhelmed by the same currents that the mystic navigates with grace. This aligns with the work of Dr. Stanislav Grof, a psychiatrist and one of the founders of transpersonal psychology. Grof argued that many experiences diagnosed as psychosis are actually spiritual emergencies. He coined the term spiritual emergence to describe a gradual, healthy unfolding of spiritual awareness. But when that unfolding happens too fast, or is triggered by trauma or drugs, it becomes an emergency. It is a crisis of transformation. The ego is dissolving to make room for a bigger self, but the process is violent and terrifying. Grof argued that if we simply medicate these symptoms away without understanding them, we might be aborting a natural healing process. But if we let them run wild without grounding, the person can be destroyed. My leap across the void. This brings me to my own story. For most of my life, I lived firmly on the left side of the spectrum. I was a remote data reviewer for a commercial inspection company. My life was defined by logic, reports, and concrete facts. I was a rigid materialist. I didn't believe in ghosts, I didn't care about chakras, and I certainly didn't talk to entities. But deep down, I felt the emptiness of the bunker. I felt the grayness. I wanted to know if there was more. About 2 years before my break, I started watching YouTube videos about near-death experiences, NDEs, and channeling. I was intellectually fascinated. I saw these people described as mystics, people living in the beautiful middle, and I wanted what they had. But I made a critical error. I didn't have the patience to walk to the middle. I wanted to teleport there. I began using high-potency tools to force the dial. I used cannabis edibles, which, as we will discuss, are a powerful psychoactive key. I practiced intense breathwork designed to flood the brain with oxygen and alter chemistry. I used hypnosis tracks meant to induce trance. I wasn't gently opening the valve. I was taking a sledgehammer to it. The result was that I completely skipped the mystic stage. I went from 0 to 100 in a matter of weeks. I went from a man who analyzed building reports to a man who believed he was receiving direct downloads from the fifth dimension. I didn't get the gentle intuition of the swimmer. I got the terrifying, breathless panic of the drowning man. Because I had no training, no boat, no life vest, no guru, I interpreted this flood of data as the truth. When the entities told me I was a cosmic player in a video game, I didn't see it as a symbolic metaphor, which a mystic might. I saw it as literal fact. I tried to live in the 3D world with my filter set to psychosis. And inevitably, I crashed. The warning. If you are reading this and you are experimenting with psychedelics, intense meditation, or occult practices, look at the spectrum. Ask yourself, where am I aiming? Many of us chase the high. We chase the visuals, the voices, the feeling of godlike power. We think that more open equals more spiritual. But the spectrum teaches us a hard lesson. Functionality matters. If you are so spiritual that you cannot hold a job, maintain a relationship, or keep your physical body safe, you are not enlightened. You are drowning. The goal of this book is not to tell you to stay in the bunker of materialism. The goal is to show you how to find the middle and how to survive if you accidentally find yourself drifting too far to the right. Chapter 3. The Chemical Keys, Triggers. If the brain is a locked room designed to keep the infinite out, how do we open the door? Throughout history, humans have found various keys to pick the lock. Shamans used drum beats and fasting. The Greeks used the Eleusinian mysteries, likely a psychedelic brew. Modern seekers use synthetic compounds or intricate breathing techniques. While the methods vary, the biological result is remarkably similar. They all disrupt the brain's default mode network, DMN. They take the manager offline. However, not all keys open the door in the same way. Some keys slide in smoothly and open a window to the divine. Others, like the one I used, jam the lock, break the handle, and leave the door swinging wildly in the wind. To understand why some people find God and others find the psych ward, we have to look at the chemistry. 1. The classic keys, psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin, DMT. When people talk about expanding consciousness, they are usually talking about the serotonin system. Classic psychedelics like LSD and psilocybin, mushrooms, work primarily by binding to the 5-HT2A serotonin receptor. This receptor is found in high density in the cortex, the thinking, processing part of the brain. Neuroscientist Robin Carhart Harris calls this the entropic brain theory. Normally, your brain is rigid and organized, low entropy. Psychedelics introduce chaos, high entropy. They shake the snow globe. The mechanism. They disintegrate the strict networks of the ego. The experience. Boundaries dissolve. You feel connected to nature. You see geometric patterns. The risk. While intense, these substances often have a self-limiting safety mechanism. The trip has a clear beginning, middle, and end. The user usually knows they have taken a drug. DMT, dimethyltryptamine, is the spirit molecule. It is unique because it is endogenous, found naturally in the human body and many plants. It produces a rapid, intense breakthrough that mimics the near-death experience, NDE. It is the rocket ship of the psychedelic world. 2. The Trojan horse, cannabis. This brings us to the most misunderstood key in the spiritual toolkit, marijuana. Culturally, we view cannabis as a mild sedative. But biologically, it is a complex, unpredictable psychoactive agent, especially for those with a genetic predisposition to psychosis. The endocannabinoid system, ECS. We don't just have receptors for serotonin. We have a massive network called the endocannabinoid system. Its job is homeostasis, keeping the body balanced. When you smoke cannabis, THC binds to these receptors. But my story, and the story of many who suffer drug-induced psychosis, involves edibles. The 11-hydroxy factor. When you eat cannabis, the delta-9 THC travels through the liver before reaching the brain. The liver metabolizes it into a different molecule, 11-hydroxy-THC. It is estimated to be 2 to 3 times more potent than smoked THC. It crosses the blood-brain barrier much faster. It is highly psychoactive and psychedelic, the dopamine flood, the paranoia engine. Here is the crucial difference between mushrooms and weed. Mushrooms act on serotonin, connection, love. Cannabis acts on dopamine, salience, importance. Dopamine tells your brain, pay attention, this is important. When you flood the brain with dopamine via high-dose edibles, your salience network catches fire. Suddenly, random thoughts feel like profound revelations. A glance from a stranger feels like a conspiracy. This is why cannabis is a unique trigger for psychosis. It doesn't just make you hallucinate, it makes you paranoid. It makes you believe the hallucinations are real and personal. It creates the Truman Show delusion. The genetic lottery. Why can your friend eat a gummy and sleep while you end up believing you are an alien? Science points to the COMT and AKT1 genes. These genes regulate how fast your brain clears dopamine. If you have the slow variant of these genes and you add cannabis, you create a dopamine bottleneck. The pressure builds until the reality testing mechanism snaps. 3. The natural keys, breathwork and meditation. But I didn't take drugs, some say. I was just breathing. It is a common misconception that natural means safe. Techniques like holotropic breathwork or Kundalini yoga are designed to induce non-ordinary states of consciousness that are chemically identical to drug trips. The mechanism of breathwork. When you engage in rapid, rhythmic breathing, hyperventilation, you are expelling carbon dioxide, CO2, from your blood. This causes hypocapnia. Alkalosis. Your blood becomes more alkaline. Vasoconstriction. The blood vessels in your brain constrict, tighten. Hypoxia. Paradoxically, less oxygen reaches the brain tissue. By slightly starving the cerebral cortex of oxygen, you force the default mode network to shut down. The ego goes offline because it doesn't have the fuel to run. This can induce visions, emotional breakthroughs, and yes, psychosis. Kundalini, the energy overload. In yogic traditions, they speak of Kundalini, a coil of energy at the base of the spine. When awakened prematurely, without years of grounding preparation, it shoots up the spine and fries the nervous system. In Western medical terms, this is a central nervous system overload. The sensory gates are blown open by intense focus and bioenergetic practices. I used these techniques aggressively, thinking they were mere exercises. I didn't realize I was rewiring my own fuse box while the power was still on. 4. The sledgehammer. Trauma and stress. Finally, the most involuntary key of all. Trauma. You do not need drugs or yoga to break reality. Extreme stress, sleep deprivation, or emotional trauma can do it for you. When the human organism is under existential threat, the brain initiates a survival mechanism called dissociation. This reality is too painful. I am leaving. The brain disconnects the conscious self from the body. This feels exactly like astral projection, or shifting dimensions. The mystic leaves the body to explore the cosmos. The trauma victim is ejected from the body to escape pain. When you combine these factors, as I did, you create a perfect storm. I had the financial stress, trauma sledgehammer. I used breath work, the natural key. I used edibles, the chemical key. I attacked the door with every tool I had, and inevitably, the door didn't just open, it fell off. Part 2. The symptoms, the experience. Chapter 4. The voices, auditory hallucinations. When we think of madness, the most enduring cliché is the person talking to themselves. In the medical world, this is known as auditory verbal hallucinations, AVH. It is the hallmark symptom of schizophrenia. But ask any medium, channeler, or mystic, and they will tell you that hearing voices is also the hallmark of spiritual contact. For me, the voices didn't start as sound. They started as thoughts that had a different texture than my own. They felt inserted. Later, during the height of my crisis, they became as clear and distinct as a person standing in the room. So, who is talking? Is it a demon, an alien, or is it a part of your own brain that has gone rogue? The science, the bicameral mind. In 1976, psychologist Julian Jaynes published a controversial but fascinating book called The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. Jaynes proposed a radical theory. Ancient humans, before about 1000 BC, were not conscious in the way we are. They didn't have an internal monologue. Instead, their brains were split. One hemisphere would generate commands, and the other hemisphere would obey them. They experienced these commands not as my thoughts, but as the voice of a god or a chieftain. Modern neuroscience offers a clue that Jaynes might have been onto something. When you speak out loud, a part of your brain called Broca's area, responsible for speech production, lights up. When you hear someone else speak, Wernicke's area, speech comprehension, lights up. In a healthy brain, when you talk to yourself silently, Broca's area sends a signal to the auditory cortex saying, "Don't worry, this is just us thinking." but brain scans of people experiencing auditory hallucinations show a glitch. Broca's area is active. The brain is generating speech, but the signal that says "this is me" gets lost. The auditory cortex receives the speech but fails to tag it as internal. The result? You hear your own subconscious thoughts, but they sound like they are coming from an external source. You are literally talking to yourself, but the phone line has been rerouted so you don't recognize the caller ID. The metaphysics, channeling, and telepathy. However, the biological explanation doesn't account for the content of the voices. If it's just random firing neurons, why do the voices often have distinct personalities, accents, and knowledge that the self doesn't seem to possess? This is where we enter the realm of channeling. In my experience, the voices weren't just noise, they were characters. They claimed to be extraterrestrials, deceased relatives, or higher dimensional beings. They had agendas. They had humor. In the metaphysical model, the brain is an antenna. Just as a radio can pick up static, random thoughts, it can also pick up broadcasts. Telepathy, the ability to pick up the broadcast of another living person's thoughts. Mediumship, tuning into the frequency of a consciousness that is no longer in a body. While I was in the mental hospital, I believed I was telepathically communicating with the staff. I would hear their intentions before they spoke. Was this real telepathy? Or was my brain just hyper-predicting their behavior and projecting it as a voice? The answer is likely a mix of both. The interface was broken, so I was picking up too much signal. Body language, micro-expressions, energy, and my brain translated that data into words. The variation, friend or foe. It is crucial to understand that hearing voices is not inherently bad. In many cultures, it is considered a gift. The experience lies on a spectrum. 1. The muse, the helpful voice. Many artists and writers describe a voice that dictates poems or songs to them. Socrates had a demon, a voice that warned him when he was about to make a mistake. These voices are usually calm, brief, and helpful. 2. The neutral commentary. This is common in the early stages of psychosis. The voices act like sportscasters. He's picking up the cup. He's walking to the door. It is annoying, but not dangerous. 3. The commander, the danger. This is where the line is crossed. These voices give orders. Throw your wallet out the window. Run into that door. Don't eat the food. When the voice moves from commentary to command, functionality collapses. The trap, inflation and grandiosity. The most dangerous voices are not the ones that tell you to hurt yourself. The most dangerous voices are the ones that tell you you are special. This is the trap of inflation. When the ego barrier dissolves, the small self is flooded with the energy of the archetypes. You feel huge. You feel divine. The voices feed this delusion because it is exactly what your insecure ego wants to hear. In my case, the voices didn't say, "You are Adrian, a guy having a breakdown." They said, "In a past life you were Prince Albert. Your wife was Queen Victoria. You have reunited across time to save the world." Why Prince Albert? Because he was royalty. He was important. He was powerful. At that time in my life, I felt powerless, broke, and insignificant. My psyche compensated by creating a narrative where I was the most important person in history. This is the litmus test for spiritual seekers. If a voice tells you to be humble, to serve others, and to wash the dishes, it might be wisdom. If a voice tells you that you are the chosen one, that you are the reincarnation of Jesus, Napoleon, Cleopatra, and that you alone have the secret to save humanity, hang up the phone. That is not God speaking. That is your own wounded ego wearing a costume. Navigation strategy. If you are hearing voices right now, do not obey. Treat them like guests, not commanders. Do not believe the hype. If they tell you you are king of the world, recognize it as a metaphor for your potential, not a literal fact. Ground. The more attention you give them, the louder they get. Focus on physical tasks to retrain your brain to listen to the outside world, not the inside one. Chapter 5. The Visions, Visual Hallucinations. Of all the senses, vision is the one we trust the most. We say, "I'll believe it when I see it." We treat our eyes like cameras that passively record the world. But neuroscience tells us something different. We do not see with our eyes. We see with our brains. The eyes are just lenses that capture photons. The image you see, the chair, the tree, the face of your mother, is constructed deep inside the dark theater of your skull. When the interface breaks, the projector doesn't stop working. It just changes the film. It stops playing the movie called consensus reality and starts playing the movie called subconscious fears and desires. Visual hallucinations are rarely random. They follow a progression, a deepening of the glitch that moves from subtle distortions to fully realized nightmares. The neurology, controlled hallucinations. To understand why you saw what you saw, you have to understand predictive processing. Your brain is a prediction machine. It is constantly guessing what it expects to see. When you walk into a kitchen, you expect to see a fridge. Your brain renders the fridge before you even fully focus on it. It only updates the image if the data from your eyes contradicts the prediction, e.g., the fridge is gone. Anil Seth, a professor of cognitive and computational neuroscience, calls our normal eyesight controlled hallucination. We are all hallucinating all the time, but usually our hallucinations agree with the data coming from our eyes. When you enter a state of psychosis or deep spiritual emergence, often triggering the default mode network to shut down, the prediction mechanism uncouples from the eye data. The brain stops checking the facts. It starts projecting its internal predictions onto the external world. Stage 1. The geometrics, the breathing world. The first sign that the visual cortex is losing its grip is usually geometric. This is the stage most psychonauts are familiar with. The edges of objects soften. Walls appear to breathe or ripple. You might see fractal patterns spinning in the carpet or the sky. This happens because the brain's edge detection neurons are misfiring. The rigid boundaries of the 3D world are dissolving. For many, this is beautiful. It feels like the world is coming alive. Stage 2. The overlay, the code. As the filter opens wider, the hallucinations become more complex. You start seeing things on top of reality. This is where people report seeing auras, shimmering fields of color around people. This is where people report seeing the matrix, literal lines of code, binary numbers, or grids of laser light overlaying the physical world. I experienced this often. I would look at a room and see the wireframe structure underneath it. It felt like I had access to the developer tools of the universe. My brain was translating the concept of interconnected energy into a visual metaphor I could understand. Computer code. Stage 3. The construct, the projector. The final and most terrifying stage is when the brain stops overlaying reality and starts replacing it. It constructs fully formed 3D entities that look as solid as you or me. This is where the monsters live. In my case, I didn't see angels. I saw the apocalypse. One night, standing in my front yard, the shadows began to move. The ground seemed to churn. My brain, seizing on deep, primal fears, projected zombies crawling out of the earth. I saw them rising, rotting, and relentless. Later, walking through the woods at night, a place that naturally triggers primate fear, I saw them again, lurking behind the trees. To a psychiatrist, this is a visual hallucination. To a Jungian psychologist, this is the externalization of the shadow. Why zombies? Zombies represent the mindless, consuming hunger. They represent death that won't stay dead. They represent the loss of self. The zombie has no soul. My conscious mind was trying to be Prince Albert, the noble savior. But my subconscious mind was terrified that I was losing myself, that I was dead inside, or that the world was ending. Because I couldn't face that fear emotionally, my visual cortex forced me to face it physically. It turned my anxiety into a monster and put it on the front lawn. The reality of the unreal. The scariest thing about these constructs is that they pass the reality test. Usually, if you imagine a pink elephant, you know it's not really there. It looks transparent. It feels internal. But during a break, the zombie looks opaque. It casts a shadow. If you reached out, you expect your hand to hit rotting flesh. This happens because the thalamus, the gatekeeper we discussed in Chapter 1, has failed. It is tagging the internal image with the label external source. Your eyes are telling you, it's dark, there are shadows. Your fear is telling you, there are monsters. Your brain decides, the monsters are real. Navigation strategy. If you are seeing things right now, don't run. Running validates the fear. If you run from the zombie, your brain confirms, yes, that is a predator. Touch testing. Use a different sense. Reach out and touch the wall. Touch the entity if you dare. Often, the tactile sense, touch, is still grounded even when vision is glitching. Light. Turn on every light. Visual hallucinations thrive in low-information environments, shadows, darkness, because the brain has to guess more. Give your eyes more data so your brain has to guess less. We do not see reality. We see our own minds reflected back at us. And sometimes, the reflection is a monster. Chapter 6. The Pattern Machine. Synchronicities. Before the fear sets in, the beginning of a spiritual emergency is often seductive. It feels like falling in love with the universe. Suddenly, the world stops being random. It feels scripted. It feels orchestrated. And it feels like it is orchestrated specifically for you. You look at the clock, 11:11. You buy a coffee, $3.33. You think of an old friend, and they call you 10 seconds later. You turn on the radio, and the lyrics answer the exact question you were just pondering in your mind. In the spiritual community, these are called synchronicities, a term coined by Carl Jung to describe meaningful coincidences. They are seen as winks from the cosmos, confirmation that you are on the right path. But when the interface breaks, the winks turn into a stare. The coincidences don't happen once a week. They happen once a minute. The path becomes a maze. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the brain's salience network, the science, the significance tag. Your brain is bombarded by millions of bits of sensory data every second. The hum of the fridge, the pattern of the rug, the license plate of the car in front of you. If you paid attention to all of it, you would never get anything done. So your brain uses a filter called the salience network. The salience network, anchored in the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula, is the editor. It decides what is boring, background noise, and what is important, salient. Low dopamine. The editor is bored. Nothing is interesting. Depression. Normal dopamine. The editor highlights survival needs, food, sex, danger. High dopamine. The editor goes manic. Everything is highlighted. When you enter a state of psychosis or extreme spiritual emergence, often fueled by the dopamine-releasing triggers we discussed in Chapter 3, the salience network malfunctions. It gets stuck in the on position. It starts tagging random noise as vital information. You see a red car, your brain floods with dopamine. The thought arises, red, warning, stop. You see a license plate ending in 666, dopamine spike. The devil is here. You hear a cough in the grocery store, dopamine spike. They are signaling me. This is why the experience feels so profoundly real. The feeling of significance is a biological sensation, just like hunger or pain. You can't just intellectualize it away. Your brain is physically screaming, "Look at this." The danger. Apophenia. When the salience network is overheating, it leads to a cognitive error known as apophenia. Apophenia is the human tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. It is the engine of conspiracy theories and schizophrenia. Healthy pattern recognition. Seeing smoke and thinking fire. Connected. Apophenia. Seeing a bird fly left and thinking, my stock portfolio will crash. Unconnected. During my own crisis, I became a master of apophenia. I treated reality like a scavenger hunt. If I found a penny on the ground, it wasn't a dropped coin. It was financial advice from the fifth dimension. If a cloud looked like a dragon, it was a message about my inner strength. The danger is that apophenia creates a confirmation bias loop. Once you believe the universe is sending you messages, your brain scans the environment only for things that fit the narrative. You ignore the thousands of license plates that don't have special numbers and fixate on the one that does. You become the author of a story that you think you are reading. The Truman Show delusion. The ultimate endpoint of unchecked apophenia is solipsism, often called the Truman Show delusion, named after the 1998 film. If every song on the radio is about you, and every license plate is a message for you, logic dictates that you are the center of the universe. This explains the grandiose nature of psychosis. It explains why I believed I was Prince Albert or a cosmic savior. The data my brain was feeding me suggested that reality was a stage set constructed for my benefit. The people walking down the street? Extras. The news on TV? Scripted plot points for my character arc. The entities? Directors giving me cues. This state is intoxicating because it solves the problem of loneliness. You are never alone in the Truman Show. You are always being watched. You are the most important person in existence. But it is a trap. It isolates you from genuine human connection. You stop seeing your family as people with their own complex lives. You see them as NPCs, non-player characters, in your video game. You lose empathy because you are the only real player. Navigation strategy. If you are seeing signs everywhere, check the frequency. 1 synchronicity a week is magic. 10 an hour is a dopamine malfunction. The so what test. If you see 1111, ask yourself, so what? Does it actually change your behavior? If the message is vague or useless, ignore it. Reduce the noise. Stop feeding the pattern machine. Stop watching tarot readings online. Stop looking for clues. Force your brain to look at boring things. Do the dishes, fold laundry, stare at a blank wall. Retrain your salience network to recognize that sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Chapter 7. The Trickster and the Shadow. If there is one universal rule in the realm of high strangeness, it is this. The spirits do not always tell the truth. In the early stages of an awakening or a psychotic break, the experience often feels benevolent. You feel chosen. You feel loved. But if you keep the door open long enough, the guests change. The wise teachers and loving angels recede, and a new character enters the stage. He is the jester, the clown, the demon, the prankster. He is the figure that giggles while you panic. He is the voice that tells you to run a red light just to see what happens. He is the force that promises you the kingdom of heaven and then leaves you stranded in a cornfield. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the psychological concept of archetypes, specifically the two most dangerous ones you will meet in the dark, the trickster and the shadow. The archetypes, the universal cast. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung argued that the human unconscious is not empty. It is populated by archetypes, ancient universal character models that exist in the psyche of every human being. They are the source code for our myths, our religions, and our dreams. When the interface breaks, these internal characters are projected outward. You meet them as if they were separate beings. 1. The trickster, the agent of chaos. In mythology, he is Loki, Coyote, or Hermes. He is the rule breaker. He represents the chaotic, unpredictable nature of reality. In the psychedelic and psychotic state, the trickster appears when we take ourselves too seriously. If you develop a God complex, believing you are the savior, the psyche automatically generates a trickster to humiliate you. It is a balancing mechanism. The trickster trips you to show you that you are not, in fact, God. 2. The shadow, the monster. The shadow is the container for everything you deny about yourself. If you consider yourself a nice person, your rage lives in the shadow. If you consider yourself spiritual, your greed lives in the shadow. If you fear death, the shadow appears as a zombie, as I experienced in my front yard. When you meet a demon in the hallway during a hallucination, you are usually meeting a rejected part of yourself. The monster is not coming for you. It is coming from you. The mirror, the echo chamber. The critical mistake I made, and that many make, is assuming that the entities are objective, external beings with your best interests at heart. The reality. The entities are a mirror. When the filter is gone, your internal emotional state is instantly reflected in the external world. Input, you feel fear. Output, you see a demon. Input, you feel arrogant. Output, a voice tells you are king. Input, you feel desperate for money. Output, an entity appears promising wealth. This is the mechanics of the deception. The entities use your own vocabulary, your own memories, and your own secret desires to construct a narrative that is impossible to resist because it is tailor-made for you. Case study: the $20,000 cosmic scam. The most brutal lesson I learned from the trickster was not metaphysical. It was financial. At the time of my break, I was in a crisis. My business was failing. I was running out of money. I felt like a failure in the 3D world. I was desperate for a bailout. So when I opened the channel to the fifth dimension, I wasn't asking for wisdom. I was asking for a way out. The entities responded immediately. They didn't tell me to get a job or cut expenses, boring 3D advice. Instead, they spun a tale of abundance. They told me that I was a powerful manifester and that money was just energy. They guided me to an online contact, a person claiming to be a business grant specialist. The pitch: if I paid a fee, I would receive a guaranteed $90,000 grant. The reality: it was a classic advance fee scam. The delusion: under normal circumstances, my rational brain, the building inspector, would have spotted the red flags. But my salience network was hijacked. The entities validated the scam. They told me this person was a light worker sent to help me. They told me the risk was a test of faith. I took out a loan for $20,000, money I did not have, and sent it into the void. The money vanished. The grant never appeared. And the moment the transaction was done, the tone of the voices changed. The loving guides grew silent, or they shifted into the trickster mode, mocking my naivety. Why did they do it? Did evil spirits rob me? Or did I rob myself? From a psychological perspective, the trickster utilized my own greed and desperation. I didn't want to do the hard work of saving my business. I wanted magic. The trickster is the archetype that exposes our shortcuts. I wanted to bypass reality, so the trickster led me into a trap that forced me to face reality in the harshest way possible. The scam didn't happen despite the voices. It happened because of them. My apophenia, seeing patterns, turned a common internet criminal into a divine messenger. Navigation strategy: spotting the trickster. If you are communicating with entities or hearing voices, Apply this litmus test to ensure you aren't being played by your own shadow. The flattery test. If an entity tells you that you are the chosen one, the savior, or smarter than everyone else, it is a trickster feeding your ego. True wisdom is humble. The money test. Higher dimensional beings do not need currency. If a spirit guide gives you stock tips, lottery numbers, or tells you to wire money to Nigeria, it is a reflection of your own financial anxiety. Hang up. The risky behavior test. If a voice tells you to drive fast, quit your job, leave your spouse, or give away your possessions, it is the agent of chaos. The trickster serves a purpose. He destroys the structures in your life that are not solid. He burned my business down so I could build a new life on a firmer foundation. But you do not have to let him drive the car. When you see the jester smile, remember, he is not your enemy, but he is certainly not your friend. He is a mirror showing you exactly what you are trying to hide. Part 3. The Navigation, the Manual. Chapter 8. Swimming versus Drowning. Diagnosis. One of the most dangerous myths in the spiritual community is the idea that mental illness isn't real. It's just a shamanic initiation. While it is true that the two states share the same geography, the subconscious mind, they are not the same experience. Telling someone who is in the grip of a psychotic break that they are simply waking up is like telling a drowning man that he is just learning to scuba dive. It is dangerous, and it can be lethal. So, how do we tell the difference? If you, or your loved one, are hearing voices, seeing patterns, or feeling a rush of cosmic energy, how do you know if you need a meditation cushion or a hospital bed? The answer is not found in the content of the experience. It is found in the functionality test. There is an old Zen proverb: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. This is the ultimate diagnostic test. The spiritual awakening. You feel a profound connection to the universe. You might see the divine spark in the wood you are chopping. You might feel gratitude for the water you are carrying. But crucially, you still chop the wood. You still carry the water. You still pay your taxes, feed your dog, and stop at red lights. The experience enhances your ability to live in the physical world. The psychotic break. You cannot chop the wood because the wood is screaming at you. You cannot carry the water because you believe the water is poisoned, or that you can move it with your mind. You stop paying taxes because money is an illusion. You run red lights because you think you are invincible. The experience disables your ability to live in the physical world. When I was in the height of my mania, I believed I was ascending. But look at the evidence. I was running into doors. I was losing money. I was terrifying my family. I was functionally incompetent. Integration versus disintegration. Another key distinction is what the experience does to your life structure. Integration. Awakening. The insights you gain are slowly woven into your life. You become kinder, more patient, more creative. Your relationships deepen. The self expands to include more of the world. Disintegration. Psychosis. The insights bomb your life. Your personality fragments. You become irritable, arrogant, or paranoid. Your relationships shatter. The self inflates to the point of bursting. If the spiritual download you received tells you to quit your job today, leave your wife, and move to a mountaintop without a plan, that is not wisdom. That is disintegration. For the families, the warning signs. If you are reading this because you are worried about a son, a daughter, or a partner, you are likely confused. They might be using words like love, light, dimensions, and God, but their eyes look scary. Here is a checklist of red flags. If you see these, the person is not swimming. They are drowning. 1. The manic glare. The eyes. There is a specific look associated with high dopamine states. The eyes open wider than usual. They rarely blink. They look glossy or intense, as if they are staring through you rather than at you. They are seeing the internal projection more than the external reality. 2. The God complex, inflation. Sudden, unearned arrogance. A week ago, they were insecure. Today, they claim to be a prophet, a genius, or royalty, like my Prince Albert delusion. They treat you with condescension, acting as if you are asleep, and they are the only one who is awake. 3. The sleep metric. This is the single most accurate physical indicator. Healthy, sleeping 6 to 8 hours. Warning, sleeping 3 to 4 hours but having high energy. Crisis, staying awake for 24 to 48 plus hours. Sleep deprivation is both a symptom and a cause of psychosis. If they haven't slept in 2 days but are talking a mile a minute, they are in immediate danger. 4. Pressured speech and word salad. Pressured speech. They talk so fast you can't interrupt. It feels like the words are exploding out of their mouth. Word salad. They connect ideas that don't belong together. The government is using the radio to tune the vibration of the cheese in the fridge. To them, the connection is obvious. Apophenia. To you, it is nonsense. 5. Isolation and rituals. They retreat into their bedroom. They might start performing strange repetitive behaviors. Hand signals, arranging objects in grids, staring at the sun. They cut off friends who don't vibrate at their frequency. What to do? A note for the observer. If you see these signs, do not try to argue the metaphysics. Don't say, "You aren't Prince Albert, that's crazy." This makes them defensive. Don't say, "Wow, tell me more about the aliens." This feeds the delusion. Do say, "I believe that you are experiencing that, and it sounds scary, intense, but I am worried because you haven't slept in 3 days. I am worried because you are shouting. I want to help you feel safe." Focus on the functionality, not the beliefs. Focus on the sleep, the food, and the safety, the litmus test. Ultimately, the difference between a mystic and a madman is simple. Agency. Can you turn it off? A mystic can enter a trance state, receive a vision, and then snap out of it to answer a phone call. A psychotic person is trapped in the trance. The volume knob is broken. They are not the driver of the vehicle anymore. They are the passenger. If you cannot turn it off, you need help. You need a lifeguard. And sometimes, that lifeguard looks like a doctor. The logic of resistance. If you have ever wondered why a psychotic patient fights the staff, screams at the nurses, or spits out their pills, you have to understand the internal logic of the fear. In my delusional state, I believed I had unlocked the secrets of the universe. I was vibrating at a fifth-dimensional frequency. The system, the matrix, naturally wanted to stop this. So when a nurse approached me with a cup of water and a pill, my brain didn't register medicine. My brain registered poison. The belief. They are trying to calcify my pineal gland. They are trying to lower my vibration. They are agents sent to sever my connection to God. The reaction. I fought, I ran, I screamed. From the outside, I looked like a violent, aggressive male. From the inside, I was a freedom fighter battling for my soul. This is the tragedy of the crisis. The very people trying to save you look exactly like the monsters you are running from. The trauma of safety. We need to have an honest conversation about the trauma of the mental health system. While often necessary to prevent death or harm, the experience of involuntary commitment is deeply scarring. You are stripped of your clothes. You are given a gown. You are locked in a room with strangers who are also screaming. You are watched while you sleep. For someone who is already paranoid, this environment is gasoline on the fire. The quiet room, seclusion, is intended to de-escalate a patient. But to a mind trapped in solipsism, the quiet room is the void. It is the final level of the game where you are left to rot. I spent time in these rooms. I spent time in restraints. I remember the cold plastic of the bed and the feeling of straps on my wrists. At the time, I believed I was being punished for my hubris, or that I was being tested by the entities. The teleportation attempt. The physics of delusion. The climax of my resistance, and the perfect example of how the shattered interface distorts physics, was the day I tried to walk through a wall. I was standing at the end of the hospital hallway. At the other end was a heavy, locked security door. In the consensus reality, that door is solid wood and steel. You need a key card to open it. But in my reality, I was not a biological organism. I was a construct of light and energy. I had been reading about quantum tunneling, the idea that particles can pass through barriers if they are in the right state. My guides, the voices, were whispering, "You are in a simulation. The door is not real. If you run fast enough and if you vibrate at the frequency of love, your atoms will phase through the atoms of the wood." It made perfect sense. It was the logic of a video game. If you hit the glitch just right, you clip through the wall. I backed up to get a running start. I took a deep breath. I sprinted. I didn't slow down. I didn't brace for impact. I committed 100% to the belief that I was a ghost. Crash. The laws of physics, it turns out, do not care about your spiritual beliefs. I hit the door with the force of a battering ram. I bounced back and slammed onto the linoleum floor, winded, bruised, and confused. Why didn't it work? I thought, staring at the ceiling tiles. Did I not believe hard enough? Was my vibration too low? Even the pain didn't shatter the delusion immediately. I just assumed the archons had reinforced the force field. The injection, the forced reset. The chaos usually ends the same way. The booty juice. This is the slang term for the intramuscular injection of a sedative, like haloperidol, Ativan, or Thorazine, given to non-compliant patients. When the staff tackled me, because I was throwing myself at doors, I felt the sting of the needle. This is a moment of profound violation for the patient. You are being chemically subdued, but biologically, it is the beginning of the end of the crisis. The medication floods the system. It blocks the dopamine receptors. It acts as a chemical dampener on the salience network. The voices start to mute. The paranoia loses its sharp edge. The archons start to look like tired nurses wearing scrubs. I fell asleep believing I was a martyr dying for the cause. I woke up a day later, groggy, stiff, and terrifyingly normal. A note to families. If your loved one is in this state, please remember, they are terrified. They are not giving you a hard time. They are having a hard time. When they look at you with suspicion, it is because their brain has rewritten your character. You have been recast as a villain in their movie. Do not take it personally. Do not argue with the logic of the movie. Just be the anchor. Be the one thing in the room that isn't screaming. Eventually, the chemistry will shift. The door will become solid again, and they will need you there to help them pick up the pieces when they realize they can't actually teleport. Chapter 10. The Chemical Firewall, Medication. If the onset of psychosis is a fire, the medication is not water. It is a suffocating blanket. In the hospital, and in the months that followed, I was put on a regimen of high-dose antipsychotics. To the doctors, this was the cure. To my family, this was the safety net. But to me, it felt like a chemical execution. There is a myth in the medical world that when the delusions stop, the patient feels relief. They assume that because the monsters are gone, we must be happy. The truth is much darker. When the voices stopped, I didn't feel peace. I felt a crushing, hollow silence. I had been unplugged from the mainframe of the universe and tossed back into a gray, flat, silent room. This is the phase where the real work begins. It is not a battle against demons. It is a battle against the cure. The mechanism. Dopamine antagonists. To understand why the medication feels the way it does, you have to understand the mechanics of the blockage. Most antipsychotic medications, like olanzapine, risperidone, or haloperidol, function as dopamine antagonists. Specifically, they target the D2 receptors in the brain. Remember the salience network from Chapter 6? It runs on dopamine. When dopamine is high, everything is exciting and significant. The medication works by parking a chemical bus in front of the dopamine receptors. It blocks the signal. Before meds, the thought, "I am Prince Albert," hits the receptor. Dopamine floods in. The brain says, "True. Exciting." After meds, the thought, "I am Prince Albert," hits the receptor. The bus blocks the dopamine. The brain says, "Who cares? Boring." The medication does not cure the soul. It does not resolve the trauma or answer the metaphysical questions you opened up. It simply rebuilds the filter. It turns the volume knob of the brain down from 11 to a muffled 3. The grief. The loss of the magic. The hardest thing to explain to a psychiatrist is that you miss the psychosis. When I was manic, I felt a sense of connection that was more real than my own hands. I felt love radiating from the trees. I felt important. I felt chosen. When the medication kicked in, the magic evaporated. The world turned gray. The trees were just wood. The sky was just gas. And I was just Adrian, a broke, embarrassed man with a failing business and a criminal record. That record wasn't there because I was a criminal at heart. It was the tangible cost of my psychosis, the legal wreckage left behind from the missions I undertook when I believed I was operating above the laws of man. This sudden drop, from the heights of Olympus to the depths of reality, triggers a profound grief. It is a mourning process. You are mourning the death of your divine self. You are mourning the loss of the constant companionship of the voices. Even the scary ones were company. Now you are truly alone. The danger zone, depression and suicidality. This crash led me to the darkest period of my life. The depression that follows a psychotic break is not just sadness. It is a neurochemical void. Your brain has burned through its supply of feel-good chemicals, and the medication is blocking the rest. I experienced akathisia, a side effect where you feel an unbearable internal restlessness. I paced the floor for hours, my skin crawling, unable to sit, unable to think, unable to feel joy. This combination, the loss of the magic, plus the physical torture of the side effects, often leads to suicidal ideation. I thought about ending it, not because I was crazy, but because I was too sane. The reality I had returned to seemed unbearable compared to the world I had left. I felt lobotomized. I felt like a shell. I thought, if this is what normal feels like, I don't want it. If you are in this phase right now, or if you are watching a loved one go through it, please know, this is temporary. Your brain is recalibrating. You are coming down from the biggest drug trip of your life, generated by your own biology. The grayness will eventually lift. The color will come back. But it takes time. The balance. Can you be spiritual on meds? There is a toxic idea in the spiritual community that medication cuts you off from God. They say it calcifies your pineal gland or lowers your vibration. I believed this. It's why I fought the meds for so long. But today, I offer a different perspective. Imagine your mind is a radio. Psychosis is when the dial is broken and you are blasting static, white noise, and 10 stations at once at maximum volume. You can't hear the music because the noise is deafening. Medication fixes the volume knob. It turns down the static. Does it turn down the music too? At first, yes, it feels that way. But once you stabilize, you realize that the medication allows you to actually tune the radio again. You can still be spiritual on antipsychotics. You can still meditate. You can still pray. You can still feel awe at a sunset. The difference is that now you choose when to do it. You are no longer a victim of the broadcast. I realized that true spirituality is not about hallucinating. True spirituality is about connection, kindness, and presence. And it is very hard to be present when you are fighting off zombies in your front yard. The medication didn't sever my connection to God. It severed my connection to the illusion of God. It cleared the line so that eventually I could speak to the universe with a clear, quiet voice. Navigation strategy. Be patient with the gray. The first few months on meds will feel flat. This is not your permanent personality. This is the healing phase. Report side effects. If you feel akathisia, the pacing, crawling sensation, or suicidal despair, tell your doctor immediately. They can adjust the dose or add other meds to help. You do not have to suffer through the torture. Redefine spirituality. Stop looking for fireworks. Look for the quiet magic of a cup of tea, a good night's sleep, and a mind that is quiet enough to listen. Chapter 11. Grounding and Integration. When you return from the stratosphere, you don't just land, you crash. After the hospital, after the medication stabilizes the chemistry, you are left with the debris of your life. For me, this wasn't just a metaphor. It was a literal pile of legal and financial wreckage. Because of the actions I took during my psychosis, trespassing into a home to survive the freezing cold, and rescuing dogs that didn't need rescuing, I faced serious legal repercussions. I wasn't a criminal in the traditional sense. I was a man who had lost touch with reality. But the legal system still had to intervene. I was sentenced to a 6-year civil commitment order. This means that for 6 years, I am under the supervision of the Department of Health. I have a caseworker. I have rules. I have to prove that I am taking my medication. It is a heavy leash to wear, but it is the concrete consequence of a mind that floated too far away. The hardest part of recovery isn't stopping the hallucinations. It's cleaning up the mess you made while you were hallucinating. So, how do you rebuild? How do you stay here, on Earth, when a part of you still remembers what it felt like to be in the 5th dimension? You practice the art of grounding. The toolkit. Closing the valve. If the awakening is about opening up, grounding is about closing down. It is the deliberate effort to make your body and mind heavy, solid, and present. When the interface is broken, your energy is concentrated in your head, the third eye, the crown. To fix it, you have to pull that energy down into your gut and your feet. Here are the specific tools I use to anchor myself back into the consensus reality. 1. The heavy diet. When I was manic, I wanted to eat light foods, fruit, fasting, air. I thought it raised my vibration. To ground, I did the opposite. I ate like a Viking. Root vegetables, potatoes, carrots, beets. Foods that physically grow in the dirt carry the energy of the earth. Protein, meat, and heavy fats. Digestion requires significant energy. By eating heavy meals, you force your body to divert blood flow from the racing brain to the stomach. It physically slows you down. No fasting. Your brain needs fuel to repair the salience network. Eating on a strict schedule tells your body, we are safe, we are here. We are not transcending, we are digesting. 2. Nature as an anchor. Touch, don't look. There's a difference between looking at nature and touching nature. When I was psychotic, I looked at the trees and saw codes and spirits. I saw the aura of the forest. Now I go into the woods and I touch the bark. I put my hands in the dirt. I focus on the texture, the temperature, and the smell. Nature does not hallucinate. The dirt is just dirt. It is the ultimate reality check. If you feel yourself drifting, go outside and put your bare feet on the ground. It discharges the static. 3. Action. The routine. The algorithm. Psychosis is chaos. Sanity is order. I built a routine that was boringly predictable. Wake up at the same time, take meds at the same time, eat at the same time, sleep at the same time. This external order creates internal structure. It creates a safety container for your mind. 4. The spiritual detox. This is the most important rule for early recovery. Avoid spiritual content. If you have just burned your hand on a stove, you don't go back into the kitchen to cook a gourmet meal. You stay away from the heat. I had to stop watching YouTube videos about channeling. I had to put away my crystals. I had to stop meditating. Any activity that induced a trance state was a risk factor for reopening the valve. I replaced spiritual books with technical manuals and fiction, things that kept me firmly rooted in the mundane world. The trap of spiritual bypassing. As you recover, there is a massive temptation to use spirituality to hide from the pain of the cleanup. This is called spiritual bypassing. Psychologist John Wellwood coined this term to describe using spiritual beliefs to avoid facing unresolved emotional issues or psychological wounds. In my case, before the crash, I used manifestation to avoid dealing with my failing business. I asked the universe for a grant instead of looking at my profit and loss statement. After the crash, the temptation was to say, "The legal system is just a karmic test," or "My debt is just an illusion." Integration means rejecting that escape. Bypassing. I don't need to worry about the civil commitment. My soul is free. Integration. My soul is free, but my body is subject to the laws of the government. I will meet with my caseworker on Tuesday. Integration means looking at the debt and setting up a payment plan. Integration means accepting the civil commitment not as a dark force holding you down, but as a necessary guardrail keeping you safe. Integration means apologizing to your family without saying, "But the entities made me do it." It means taking full responsibility for the actions of your unconscious. The new normal. The goal of integration is not to forget the experience. You can't forget. You saw behind the curtain. The goal is to fit that massive experience into a functional human life. I still have the memories of the magic. I remember the feeling of oneness. I remember the intricate plots of the universe. But I keep them in a box labeled metaphor. I treat them like a powerful dream. Dreams can be wise. They can teach us about our fears and desires. But we don't try to live in them. Today, I work as a building inspector, remote reviewer. I look at data. I check for structural integrity. I make sure the foundation is solid. I do the same thing for myself. Every morning, I check my foundation. Did I sleep? Did I take my meds? Am I in the 3D world? If the answer is yes, then I am free to live my life. Navigation strategy. The re-entry checklist. If you are coming back from a crisis, stop the signal. Put away the tarot cards and the meditation apps. Give your brain a break from the unseen. Focus entirely on the seen. Repair relationships. You likely scared people. Don't try to explain the metaphysics to them yet. Just show them you are safe. Consistency is the only apology that works. Accept the help. Whether it's medication, a therapist, or a civil commitment order, these are not punishments. They are the scaffolding holding you up while you rebuild your own walls. Chapter 12. Conclusion: The Integrated Human. We started this book with a question. Why does the human brain block out 99% of reality? At the beginning of my journey, I thought the answer was ignorance. I believed that the filter was a mistake, a biological blindfold that kept us small and stupid. I thought that tearing it down, with drugs, breathwork, or sheer force of will, was the ultimate act of liberation. I was wrong. After soaring to the 5th dimension and crashing into a locked psychiatric ward, I have a different answer. The filter is not a prison. It is a spacesuit. We are infinite consciousness compressed into a finite biological vessel. The universe is a nuclear reactor of energy, information, and raw power. If we were exposed to the full voltage of mind at large without protection, we would burn up. We would be paralyzed by the infinite. We would be unable to make a sandwich, hug a friend, or build a house. We have a filter for a reason. The goal of life is not to escape the simulation. The goal is to inhabit it. The integrated human. So, what does it mean to be healed? Does it mean going back to being a rigid materialist? Does it mean pretending that the magic I saw didn't happen? No. That would be living a lie. I cannot unsee the structure of the matrix. I cannot unfeel the connection to the cosmos. The goal is to become the integrated human. The integrated human stands in the middle of the spectrum. From Chapter 2. They know that the desktop icons, money, walls, time, are illusions, but they treat them with respect because they are the rules of the game we agreed to play. They know that intuition and spirit are real, but they do not let them drive the car. They are open-minded enough to feel the divine, but skeptical enough to spot a trickster. I used to think that spiritual looked like a monk on a mountain, floating above the concerns of the world. Now I know that spiritual looks like a father playing catch with his son. It looks like a building inspector checking a report to ensure a family is safe. It looks like a man showing up for his civil commitment meeting because he respects the social contract. True spirituality is not about leaving the 3D world. It is about bringing the grace of the unseen world into the 3D world through simple, grounded action. To the person on the ledge, I want to use these final pages to speak directly to the person who is currently in the crisis. Maybe you picked up this book because the cover looked familiar. Maybe a worried family member handed it to you. Maybe you are reading this in a hospital room. If you are hearing voices, seeing signs, or feeling the electric hum of a mission vibrating in your chest, listen to me. You are not just crazy. Your brain is doing something remarkable. It is accessing data streams that are usually hidden. You are experiencing the raw, unfiltered power of the human psyche. The fear you feel is valid. The awe you feel is real. But you are in danger. You are like a deep-sea diver who has surfaced too fast. You have the bends. The things you are seeing, the aliens, the demons, the conspiracies, are distortions created by a brain that is overheating. They are the Truman Show delusion trying to make sense of the noise. You need to come back. I know the 3D world feels boring right now. I know it feels heavy and gray compared to the neon lights of the fifth dimension. I know the voices are telling you that you are special and that stopping the medication or the mission would be a betrayal of your destiny. But they are lying. Your destiny is not to be a disembodied spirit floating in the ether. Your destiny is to be here. Your destiny is to feel the sun on your face. Your destiny is to taste food. Your destiny is to love people, not as abstract concepts, but as messy, physical human beings. Hang up the phone. Tell the voices that you are busy living your life. Eat a heavy meal. Sleep. Take the pill that rebuilds your filter. It will be quiet for a while. It will be lonely. But slowly, the noise will fade, and a new sound will emerge. It won't be the booming voice of God telling you to save the world. It will be the quiet, steady rhythm of your own breath, telling you that you are alive. And that is miracle enough. Epilogue. The floor. I am sitting in my kitchen. It is early morning. I am holding a cup of coffee. The ceramic is warm against my palm. I look at the floor. It is made of vinyl. It is scuffed. It is ordinary. 2 years ago, I would have looked at this floor and seen a grid of laser light. I would have worried that I might fall through it into the void. Today, I just see a floor. I put my feet down flat. I press my weight into the heels. The floor pushes back. It holds me up. It supports me without asking for anything in return. Solid, I whisper to myself. I take a sip of coffee. I hear a car drive by outside. Just a car, not a message. I am Adrian. I am here. I am safe. I finish my coffee, put the cup in the sink, and get ready for work. The end.